This is my new sideboard. It hangs on the wall in my living room and is 3 meters and 60 centimeters wide and only 40 centimeters deep. Because you can't buy it like this, I built it myself using kitchen wall cabinets from Ikea. In this video, I will show how I attach the two suspension rails for the wall cabinets to the wall. Since I live in an old building, my house has a lot of character and rustic clay plaster, but no straight walls. However, with a few tips and tricks, which I'll go into in more detail later, flush fitting hopefully won't be too much of a challenge. The wall units are 5 mm higher than the top edge of the suspension rail, so first I set my laser to the correct height. Then I set the center of the room, which I measured and marked beforehand. To mark the drill holes, I hold the rail against the wall and mark every 6th hole. The top of the wall cupboards will later be about 2.5 centimeters above the marking. Since I don't have any electrical cables or pipes running in the wall, I don't have to worry about that. Otherwise, I would have adjusted the position of the drill holes accordingly. Before I drill the dowel holes, I first mark the drilling depth with a piece of tape. Since I use a drilling dust nozzle, I take the extra distance into account. After the holes are drilled and the dowels are in place, I first attach the suspension rail at its two ends. The enclosed washers look a bit strange. They have a drilled hole and a slanted slot. However, this is very practical because you can adjust the height of the rail by moving the washer. Here you can see how I changed the height by moving the washer back and forth. This leeway is very useful because the rest of the drill holes don't have to be 100% exactly at the marked points. Once the rail is screwed into place at one end, I use my small magnetic spirit level to level the wall rail at the other end, tighten the screw and then fasten the remaining screws. I always adjust the washer so that it presses against the top of the rail. I mount the second suspension rail in exactly the same way, making sure that both suspension rails are at exactly the same height. I now hang two of the cupboards on a trial basis. Unfortunately, the wall has a small hump where the two suspension rails meet. As a result, there is a slight offset between the suspension rails, which is transferred to the cupboards. To compensate for this offset, I use plastic glazing blocks seen here in the backs. I have them in 6 sizes from 1 mm to 6 mm thickness. They are quite cheap and always handy to have. The whole box of 600 cost me under 20 euros. There is a purchase link at the bottom of the video description. So I loosen the last 2 screws of the suspension rail, slide a block underneath and tighten the screws again. And then I repeat the whole procedure until I find the right thickness. Two millimeters is still a little too little, so I use a brown colored 3 mm block. Since the rail now also protrudes quite far from the wall at the neck screw, I use a blue 2 mm block there. And the other suspension rail also gets a small block so that it doesn't feel disadvantaged. I hang the cupboards again and now it fits exactly. If the wall slopes a little at the bottom, that's no problem either. I loosen the spacers, slide glazing blocks underneath and hammer the nails back in place. In the opposite case, if the wall is protruding at the bottom, I take some of the plaster off, as seen here. Afterwards, I compensate for over-enthusiasm when tapping off the plaster by adding a few glazing blocks. I have 100 of each color, so I want to use them. This creative handicraft with the colorful glazing blocks has something almost meditative about it.